Hi, LinkedIn, and welcome to Bragging Rights. I'm Lisa Bragg. And look, I have to tell you, it's definitely time to stop being humble. You need to be seen, be heard, and share your awesome value with the world. And one way to do that is through speaking, public speaking. You need to get out there and share your ideas. And that means, yes, standing in front of a camera or standing in front of an audience if we could, and speaking. And joining me is an absolute expert at this and training it and doing it herself, Andrea Sampson of Talk Boutique. Welcome.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm so excited to be here.
So I have a lot of introverts. I know a lot of introverts who are right now saying, uh-huh. So I want to address them first and say, yes, you do need to get up and present and do what you need to do. And you were just telling me right before we started this recording that you're an introvert.
I know. It's hard to believe. You know, people look at me and they're like, there is no way. You have blue hair. Come on. Really? You're an introvert? And you know what? It's absolutely true. I am I've done, I don't even know how many, I'm sure you've done a million of those personality profiling things. And when I do them, they always I am so far on the introvert scale. But here's the thing. I'm a learned extrovert, and I've had to be. My entire career has been in front of people. I've had to get up, I've had to present, I've had to be, in those parties doing those networking things. And so introversion really, when we talk about being an introvert, it's really about how you think. And one of the challenges that most introverts have is that we think before we speak. So we have fully formed thoughts that come out, whereas an extrovert thinks out loud. And they form their thinking as they're speaking. Now, both have merit, both are important. But when it comes to being a speaker, I think this is where there's a lot of misconception, because the belief is that you get up on stage and you just start speaking, right? Well, that is, and I know you've done a lot of speaking, so you know this is not true, right? There is a ton of work that goes into speaking on a stage. So as an introvert, what is really great is that we have the discipline to think it through, to do the work, to make sure that what we've done is really understandable. Now, I've worked with both introverts and extroverts. I'm a speaker's coach. I work with people all day, every day. And what I can tell you is that there actually is no difference. It's just a come from place. Whether they're speaking out loud, so when I'm coaching them, as an example, when I'm coaching an extrovert, I'm catching a lot, right? That's my job. I'm the catcher, because they're just throwing it at me. And what I'm doing is I'm writing it down for them so that we get the ideas into a place. When I'm working with an introvert, I'm now pulling it out of them. I'm asking questions. They both have the ability to be fantastic in front of a room. It's just making sure they've done the work first. So, as the introvert, it might be a little bit confronting to walk in front of that audience. But the reality is you've got everything you need as long as you've done the work first.
You do the work first. That's absolutely it. And we want to hear from you if you're an introvert, an extrovert, or an ambivert, whichever one you identify as, whatever test has given you, whatever. Let us know your thinking about when you get up on stage or when you get on camera, and your best tips or those things that people have told you that are just, you want to have us prove that it's false or reinforce it. There's a lot of myths to speaking in public or speaking on camera. So we'd love to help you with any of the foibles or things that you're thinking about. So put in your comments. I'll be looking over here once in a while to see if there's some comments from you. We'd love to even hear where you're from, because Andrea and I are almost neighbors who just met through a mutual friend online. So you can network in this time. So
absolutely.
Like two major blocks, two Toronto blocks away from us. So yeah, it's a small world.
It's a small world.
We want to hear where you're from. So put it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you now. And we'll keep going with our conversation. But, you talked about doing the work first, and everyone needs to do the work. You can't, some of us with years and years of experience, I can get up. My background is TV news. I used to go live. So I would tell you a story as we go. But that took years of experience and practice to get to that stage. So we just don't always wing it. 90% of 80%, 90% is the work you've done up front. So talk to us about the work we do up front.
Yeah, and it's a great question, Lisa. Thank you for bringing this up because I think it's the thing that most people get a little bit confused about. They think people do get up on stage and just wing it, and that is absolutely not the case. When I'm working with speakers, and I have worked with speakers from TED speakers, and I've worked with dozens of them, and all the way through to academics to CEOs. And here's what I got to say is that the first thing that we do is we work with them on establishing a core idea for that talk. And they work with me as a speakers coach because I can help them do that work first. Now, you may or may not have a speakers coach, but here I'm going to tell you what I do to work with them. So the first thing we do is we establish that thesis for the talk or the core idea. We call it a statement of purpose in my business. And the statement of purpose is really made up of three things: a what, a how, and a why. The what is your topic. It's the thing you're going to talk about. So if you're a subject matter expert, as an example, perhaps you're a subject matter expert in artificial intelligence. So you might be talking to us about artificial intelligence. That would be a topic. The how is your point. It's the thing you want us to know about, in this case, artificial intelligence. So you might be saying artificial intelligence is going to impact the world in ways in which we cannot even imagine. So that point, the ways in which we can't even imagine, you're going to expand upon that in your talk. But now what you've got is a core premise that you're starting to get your audience to hone in on. Now, the third part is the why. And this is the place where speaker and audience meet. The how, the what and the how are the topics or the places where the speaker wants to get information out. But the why is the place where passion comes in, which is why it's where the speaker and the audience meet, because this is where you make it matter. This is where you create impact with your audience. So in the case, in the example that I just gave you, which is artificial intelligence is going to impact the world in ways that we can't even imagine. And because of this, we now need to think about how we are creating cities, communities, and safe spaces for us as humans to exist within a world of artificial intelligence. Now, you're getting into, in this case, the why being the cities and the communities and the safe spaces where we exist. We all want to lean into that. We all want to know more about that. So you are creating a real connection with your audience. Now, if that was your core premise, you could build a whole talk around that very easily. Now, that wouldn't be the first thing you'd say, but it would be the impression or the idea that you want to leave your audience with. So knowing that before you go in certainly helps when you are stepping onto that stage and now you have to start talking. So do that work first. If you do nothing else, come up with that core idea, that core premise, and then build your talk off of that.
I love all those tips. That is a wealth of information right off the top. And Keith is joining us from London, Ontario. And I know Keith is a great public speaker already. So I think he's a professional speaker, which means they get paid. So I know a lot of people are like, if you get paid, don't call yourself a public speaker. So Lisa, I'm glad to see you already learned something useful in the first 3 minutes. Thanks for joining us and great to see you. And you're from Toronto. And Rosa, I love that, Andrea, as an extrovert, my challenge in speaking is keeping focus since I think out loud. So doing the work first is grounding for me. Absolutely grounding.
Absolutely.
And I think what it does when you do the work first is you stop making it so much about you and what you are about, because it's really always about what we're giving, and it's the audience. It's always audience, audience, audience. And I know that wasn't part of our questions, but we love you and I know in our first conversation, it's always about what we give to the audience. So just give us some thinking about how you coach with audience.
So, again, speaking is an act of giving, right? It is an act of generosity. We say this to our speakers all the time. You are sharing your gift with your audience. And so when you get up there and think about it as you're giving a gift, that's a different thing. So many people think about being on stage as being judged, right? The audience is going to judge me. Oh my God, I have to know everything about everything. And that's not true. The audience is there and they want you to succeed as much as you want to succeed. And so when you see that your role on stage is to give the gift you were given, which is the gift of your knowledge, the gift of your presence, and the gift of the unique way in which you see the world. So now start with that. Now, be there, be present, because when you're on stage, you are talking to a room full of people who want to see all of you. So making sure you are showing up fully in your body. What's your face doing? You know, this is something that is so interesting to me as a speaker's coach, because I watch faces all the time. And it's what the audience watches, of course. And most speakers forget they have a face. They get so into their speaking that they forget that they have that they have eyes that are expressive, that they can smile, that they can use their face to give indications to the audience where you're going to lean in. And now listen to what my voice is doing as well. My voice is part of this engagement. And when we are on video, because right now what's the thing that we are spending the most amount of time doing? We are talking and we're looking at each other's faces. So be aware, be present in this little box that we are living in. Where is your body positioned? How is your voice sounding? And how are you performing within this box? Because that is what you are doing. When you're in front of a camera or in front of an audience, you are performing, and you're performing with generosity.
Oh, absolute generosity. I love that. You just end that so well. But, so many of us were told and taught, don't talk with your hands. I end up taking that one away from people so many times. They're told to sit on their hands. Media training, sit on your hands. Don't use your hands. And so often, once you allow, release the hands, that's where you find small tricks of magic, and people can then be themselves. But it's sometimes
gesturing is so incredible. And you're seeing me use my hands. And we encourage people to use hands. So here's something that I think is absolutely fascinating. I was reading, so we do a lot of work with scientists and academics. And so I get to get a lot of information, really, really interesting information. And one of the speakers I was working with, it was in the area of speech pathology. And one of the things that she told me was that, and I didn't know this, that even blind people gesture. Now, why would that be? Why would a blind person gesture? Well, the reason why is because gestures actually help our brain. They help us to think. And we all have these natural gestures, and depending on your culture, gestures are widely understood. So what's happening is gesturing is actually a language in and of itself, and it helps us to connect more deeply with our audiences. Now, when we are gesturing, what we're also doing is we're giving indicators to that primitive part of our brain. I worked quite extensively at one point with Mark Bowden, who is one of the world's foremost experts in the world on body language. And I love Mark because he's so practical in the way in which he gives us these tips. And what he explained to me was that, if we look at evolutionary psychology and the way in which our brain developed, really our brain, the most primitive part of our brain that developed about 500 million years ago, which is sort of that reptilian brain or the instinctual brain. Well, it's always looking out for us to keep us safe, right? Really, it's looking for one of four things. It's saying, can it eat me? I eat it. Can I procreate with it? Or is it part of my tribe? And if it's not one of those four things, our instinctual brain says not important. So as a speaker, which one of those four do you want to be in, or five? You certainly don't want to be the not important, right? You probably want to be in the tribe. You probably want to be my friend. So I can use my gestures to show you that we are part of the same tribe. And the way that I do that is by keeping my hands at waist level, kind of navel level, keeping my shoulders just dropped and my hands open. And what I'm showing you is I have nothing to hide. I'm showing you my soft belly, the place where as animals, they would attack each other. So when I'm showing you, I'm saying, I trust you. And my hands open, I'm showing no tools, no weapons. And now what we're doing is we're inviting the audience in. So gesturing is incredibly, incredibly important on so many different levels.
Yeah, so use those hands appropriately. And I think some of us don't have great poker faces because I have expressive eyes and I'm, a little animated with my face a lot. But anyway, we're here talking to Andrea Sampson from Talk Boutique, and we want to hear from you. What challenges do you have with public speaking or speaking with groups or speaking on camera nowadays, that we all are moving on camera? We'll probably be on camera, at least where we are in the world, for a little bit longer, a lot longer. So we need to get those tools. And even if you're watching in the audience, how do you participate in some of these things? But we want to hear from you. So add your comments. And if you're watching the replay, we'll get back to those too. So, it is a great opportunity for us, though, to practice in this little box with less anxiety of going onto a big, massive stage. It's time that we can get different audiences too, because people are open to a speaker from wherever you are in the world beaming in, because that's how all of us are showing up. So what's some tips for people who are, beyond thinking about going to be a speaker and just starting out and wanting to maybe eventually be a paid speaker in this time of COVID, where we're not able to get on any stages except for digital stage?
Well, the great thing about where we are right now in this digital world is that it's 100% accessible. There are so many different virtual stages for us to be on. Today I'm on your stage, and this is a great place, to sort of have conversations and to practice. If I were in that place of wanting to be a speaker, this kind of a show, perhaps not yours, but perhaps others. And we all have friends who are doing Facebook Lives, or, you have the ability to be in front of an audience at any time. This is never before in history has this been true. Technology has given us this, and that is really quite incredible. If you are choosing to be in that place of driving towards a speaking career, there's a couple of things that I would recommend to you. So first of all, be very aware of your presence on camera. As I said, yes, your face, your gestures, these are things that are important. But when you're on camera, it's also making sure that you've set up your environment appropriately. So look around you. If you look at you or I, we've been very purposeful with what we have around us. I've got my Talk Boutique banner. You've got your Stories Change the World banner. These are things that we want people to know about. We also don't have clutter. Now, the other thing that's important is that we're maintaining an eye line. Now, I'm looking at you. I've got my camera just above the box in which I see you in. So I'm primarily looking at you. So to the audience, even though I don't know if you can't see that I'm looking at you, but it feels that way, right? Because, I'm keeping my eyes in the middle of the screen, and that's really important. Also, what is the lighting? Now, I have lights that have hopefully made me look a little better. As we get older, it's nice to have lights that are, kind to your skin. But lighting is important when you are on camera, and the framing. Do I have the camera down low and it's looking up my nose? Like, that's not flattering for anyone. So any of you who have a laptop and you're talking into your laptop, make sure you raise it at least a foot off of the desk when you are using that camera, because it is not flattering. You don't want too much space above you. You can see I have just a little bit above me, and you have the same. We have framed ourselves in the little box within which we are in. And then testing. You and I got on about 15 minutes earlier just so we could test and make sure the technology worked and make sure that we both were comfortable. Testing is important. So these are things, first of all, before you even go live, that you make sure that you've addressed. The next thing is your content. Now, for many of us, like we just said, do the work in advance. But a lot of people get really, really nervous about walking out on stage and going, oh my goodness, am I going to forget everything that I have just practiced over the last few weeks or months? And I'm going to say, well, video is forgiving that way. Because if you're, again, understanding how to use the technology, you could have a document open with bullet points in front of you right at your eye line so that you can just look at those bullet points quickly and keep yourself on track. So for the extroverts out there who need some work on staying on track, it's a great little tip. But here's the thing, don't write out your entire talk and read it. We will see it. We will see those eyes moving across the screen. So make sure you just get the bullet points.
Yeah, and sticky notes. Great little tip to have sticky notes.
Absolutely.
On your screens or at the wall behind if you really need a few more points. But it's having those 3 to 5 points that really can trigger your thinking because you know it already, and not worrying about it because you know your purpose, you know the points, you know the stories you want to tell, and having it internalized and just using it as a prompt. Because I get so many people too wanting to know, how do I use a teleprompter? And use a teleprompter in this stage. And I don't know, we didn't talk about this, but I don't know your feelings on it. Teleprompter takes time and you need to be able to run the teleprompter. So I'm running a tiny bit of tech now, but also running a teleprompter. You know, it's just too much work. It's so much, and your eyes track often if you're not doing it properly or haven't trained. And usually on broadcasting, we're, you know.
Yeah. Far back. And so you don't see it as much. Like when you're this close, you see it. You see it. You know? So yeah, I mean, so teleprompters, I mean, first of all, teleprompters, true teleprompters are, you rarely see them. You know, presidents use them and, you know, CEOs use them, but for the most part, most of us are just using some form of a low tech version of that. And so, you know, a couple of weeks ago, I had, so I ran TEDx Corktown, which was a TED event on climate change. And we put this together very, very quickly. And so our host, you know, was asked to do a lot in a very short amount of time because it all came together in a very quick amount of time. So we wrote a script for her, obviously. And, you know, what we did is we had to simulate a teleprompter. So we had it, you know, positioned under a screen and we had somebody moving it and it was a lot of work. But our host was also a professional newscaster and she knew how to scoop and speak. So she wasn't reading it, she was scooping a sentence, you know, and being able to then speak to that sentence. So even though, so when you're a professional, a teleprompter, to your point, can work because you're trained to use it. But for you and I who, or for the, you know, for the average person, it's too much and you get confused and then you start to worry that you're going to lose your place. And so there's too much going on mentally to take you out of the moment. So my recommendation would be the sticky notes, the bullet point prompts, have those, but know your talk.
Yeah, and Lisa Elder does add to the conversation saying there's an easy teleprompter app. And when I'm doing my content for the courses that I'm developing on bragging rights, I used a teleprompter because I just had so much, but it wasn't live and it was, so it's all pre-taped. And so then absolutely use a prompter, and there are lots of apps, and happy to talk to you about which ones I've explored and which ones we've used in my content company too that are accessible for any budget. But when you're doing public speaking or you're live to an audience, I think that's the key, is that a prompter is just another tool, unless you have someone else helping you with, that your brain is just accessing too many pieces. When I think it was grade 6, and Mrs. Mercer, she said, put down your pens and put down your pencils so you can concentrate and focus on one thing that's going on. So if you're doing also a prompter at the same time, that's an awful lot on your load. So if you can do it, good for you. I don't recommend it. And Andrea, our expert, doesn't recommend it either. Jennifer, glad you're joining us today too. We just have a few more minutes to talk. So if you have questions about speaking, being a paid speaker, speaking in your office, even getting up in front of 5 people, or making that big speech to your CEO and president, being a rock star internally, you do have to give speeches too. So let's go to some more questions here. Rosa says, I'm curious, Andrea, you describe speaking as a performance, and that brings to mind acting. And as you mentioned, the magic is when you show up as authentic and relatable. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, great question. This is a question we get all the time. It is a performance, but it is not acting. What we always say to the people we coach is that you show up on stage as a heightened version of you. We want to see you. We want to see the authentic you. We want that warmth to come through. But when you're on a stage or when you're in front of a camera, you have to be bigger. You have to show up in just that heightened version because that has to come through the camera. If you're naturally a shy person, you're going to have to be that much bigger. So the performance is recognizing that you are in front of people. They want to hear your message and you're delivering it with full authenticity in a way that they can hear it. And so that is heightening who you are. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it really does, because TV is actually a colder medium. So radio, audio is warm. So you don't want to, on radio, when you hear that announcer and they're over the top and like, yeah, but in TV, it's actually cold. So you think you're smiling and you actually have to amp the wattage. And so, yes, it is for, it's giving your audience more of what they need. You can't be flat. They won't tune in. They won't hear you from it. So there is that, I love that, the heightened part of yourself. So that's great. She says, I love the concept of a heightened version of you. Brilliance. Thank you. And Lisa adds, she likes the whole point of not reading. Yeah, don't read. And I love sometimes we do our practice, we know what we're saying, but that allows you by not reading to add in some great parts from that the speaker before or from whatever's happening.
Totally. And there's nothing that an audience loves more than that moment when they know the speaker is actually thinking. They can see the brain working, right? And the audience is like, oh, this is real. This is real. It's not, because we can all watch the video. But it's that moment, when the speaker is really thinking, we're like, yeah, I was there for that.
Yeah. And like when things happen naturally. So I don't have a great mic today and I'm close to the street and we have an ambulance or some sort of emergency service just went by. If I needed to, if it was that loud, if it stopped here, I would bring it up and allow that break because it's the natural moment that everyone's having. Don't ignore it. You can pause, take a beat or two, and get back on if it really disrupted you that much. So, because you are getting into it. Lisa asks, how can you get a read from your audience? So I think that's what I'm going to interpret that as. How do you read your audience, especially in this age where it's pretty flat, and we're getting a great read on our audience outside. If we were the Brady Bunch squares, 25, 50 squares right now, it's really hard because everyone's back and everyone's kind of to the face. What are your thoughts?
So ask them, get them to be engaged. The thing about Zoom or any of the different technologies that we're using, they all have chat, and use your chat as a way of getting engagement right off the top. And Lisa, you did this. You said to people, hey, tell me where you're from. Tell me what kind of day you're having. In the midst of your talk, ask them, is this making sense to you? If it is, type sense in the chat bar. Give them something to do. Because here's the thing, for most people, what's happening is they're slowly disengaging from a video event. And it's just the reality. So your job as the speaker now is to keep bringing them back. Keep bringing them back. Ask them something. Ask them to do something. Give them a job. We all love having a job. So if what you're doing, if you're on stage or you're in front of a video and you want to know whether your audience is engaged, ask them. Don't be afraid of that. In fact, what's going to happen is they are now going to start giving it to you unasked. So, which is great, but you got to get them there. So you do it right out of the gates. At the TED event that I hosted a couple of weeks ago, we actually had a facilitator and we put people into groups. So what we did after every third or fourth speaker is we separated the entire audience into small groups and we had them workshop things. And so that's another way, depending on what you're doing, there's lots of different things you can do. But again, recognize the tools within the video technology you're using and use it.
I know we said we'd go to 12, but I think we can squeeze in a few more questions because I think there's some good ones. Jennifer, we talked about being an introvert off the top. So when you watch the replay, you'll hear that. But she does ask, and I think it's a really good one. When you're feeling shy, we're not always feeling up and the heightened sense of ourselves. Yep. So what do you do when you're feeling shy or you are naturally shy? So that's a bit of the introvert conversation. But some days we're just shy and the audience is intimidating for whatever reason in our brain. Any thoughts?
Absolutely. So yeah, absolutely. So look, the reality is we don't get to choose when we're going to be shy, and we also don't get to choose whether or not we're going to show up because we have to. We've made the commitment. Today I chose to be on this show with you. I might have been feeling a little bit shy. So what do? Number one, breathe, breathe. That is so incredibly important. As humans, we tend to have shallow breathing. I did breathing exercises this morning because I knew I was going to be on this show. And I know, because I am an introvert, that it challenges me. So number one is breathe. Do the in through the nose, hold for 6, out through the nose, or out through the mouth. And what you're doing, and do 6 of those. So a count of 6 in, a hold for 6, count of 6 out, and do 6 of those. Go to the bathroom and do that. That will right away bring your entire nervous system down. The second thing is look at yourself in the mirror before you go on. Make sure you feel good about how you look, and be the best version of you that you can be. And then number 3, recognize again that what you're doing is you're giving a gift to that audience, and stay in that place. Be in the moment of the gift you're about to give. And that is such generosity. You're choosing to give a gift. And the final thing I want to say, and this is a nice little thing to do, it's a little bit of a meditation that you can do just prior to going out. So, maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes before, close your eyes and think about the moment that you finish. Think about the moment when it's done. And imagine there's a standing ovation. They are cheering you on. You are like, can't wait to get off that stage and high five everybody backstage or, in the other room. You have killed it. Take that feeling and go on with that.
Well, what a lovely way to end, because you have rocked this. I'm giving you the sign language for applause. I believe that is right. Thank you so much for joining us. And this is Andrea Sampson of Talk Boutique. I just wanted to add, Catherine says, so helpful. Heighten the gift you are giving them. That's such a beautiful way to end. If you are watching the replay, put your questions in. We'll come back and we'll take a peek to see if we can help you. Andrea, what's your ask? What would you like the audience to do?
So we work with people all the time. If you are interested in coaching, go to talkboutique.com. We've got plenty of programs. We have a Thought Leader Academy. Would love to see you enrolled in. So visit us there or reach out to me at Andrea@talkboutique.com.
Okay, I'll put those in afterwards. I was trying to do it on the fly, but that's too many things. Too many buttons and stuff like that. So I'll add in. And I'd love for you to keep following along and join. I have a new LinkedIn page that we're putting up tips and comments, and we'll share when we're going to have experts like Andrea on, and they'll join our community hopefully too and add into the conversation. So we'll see you there in Bragging Rights. So that's it for this week. Join me. I do have a guest lined up for next week, and it's going to be amazing. We're talking about swagger with Leslie M. So that's going to be really good. Okay, take care, LinkedIn. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.